Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Skaven, one of the most awesome races in Warhammer 3 and very likely to be updated with the Lords of the End Times DLC/expansion for Immortal Empires. The reason I say they're very likely to be updated is because Creative Assembly is quite likely to do tank wall. At least that's what the leaks have indicated. And as a result of that, we can probably expect a Skaven racial update to be coming alongside the Lords of the End Times DLC/expansion. Now, the Skaven are certainly one of the better races in the game. The things they do right, they have a variety of legendary lords with very different playstyles, be Queek just destroying everything in his path, Claw with his nuclear weapons and gunpowder units, Fraught with his focus on monstrous units, and Snitch with his focus on sneaky units. Of course, there's always Tretch and Skrulk, which both of them could use an update, especially Skrulk. But all the same, Skaven do have a wide variety of playstyles available to them for their legendary lords, and then with the way you played a particular faction. Because you have different heroes, chieftains, assassins, packmasters, plague priests, Ashen sorcerers, and then a wide variety of units. You do lack flying units, and you don't really have cavalry. You do have some fast-moving units, but you have infantry, ranged units with night runners, gutter runners, gunpowder units, flamethrowers, artillery, monstrous units. So there are a wide number of ways to play the Skaven, and that is great. Another advantage of the Skaven is that whenever they take a settlement, they can take it all the way up to tier 5 through the use of food. Of course, there are downsides with the Skaven, namely that you very likely are going to face a huge number of rebellions, because Skaven be Skaven, but all the same, it is certainly a race that has its ups and downs, but for the most part, it works out for them. The units, the structures, etc., the wide variety of mechanics. However, there are absolutely certain things that could and should, from my view, be updated for how the Skaven work. At least insofar as how Immortal Empires currently functions. Whether or not Immortal Empires, the map, the gameplay changes of that with Lords of the End Times, that remains to be seen, but Skaven could certainly use certain things to make that experience even more awesome. So for instance, let's take the idea of food. So you can use food to take over a settlement at tier 5 even. That's great, but here's the problem of food. It's, one, you spend a lot of it to get there, but that's not really an issue. The bigger issue is more so that you have a limit to how much food you have, which and the limit is determined by how many settlements you can gain. You do have under your control. So build a massive empire, you can get a lot of food. I think that the limitation over there versus food amount does end up hurting them, especially because even as you increase it, and there are various ways, like, gang research increases food capacity plus 30, gang settlements that increase all settlements increasing food capacity by 5. If we're talking about major settlements or minor settlements, that's great. But again, the problem is, this is based on a percentage of how much total food you can carry versus how much you have. So later on in a campaign, it can be downright annoying because you never take settlements at the tier they're at. You can only spend food or not spend food. But if you're spending food, well, later on in the campaign, you'll just run at the food deficit. Unless you're not spending it, in which case, every settlement you take is going to be tier 1. Granted, you do have a pretty good growth benefit, but all the same, it's just that kind of level of annoyance when we're talking about it. The second thing to talk about is, of course, the research tree. It's just outdated, really. There's some things that are great, absolutely. Then there's things that are just feels really pointless, like, oh, here's a research to generate 1 food. That's great, really. I mean, some things are good, but upkeep for Skaven slaves, not really so much. It's just this kind of weird combination of different things. Some of which are great, some of which are okay, some of which are just like whatever. And it can be hard to tell initially like what's really worth investing. For instance, I'll give you an idea. Ambush success chance is actually very important for Skaven because they have stock stand. So that's great. Every Legendary Lord of Daggers has it. Now, again, just an update that could be done with that. Of course, they also have the loyalty meter, but the problem with the loyalty meter is that it's just not an especially fun thing to use in to deal with in a campaign. Because yes, eventually you do end up having benefits through the loyalty meter with your lords, but unless you're playing clannish, but it's just that kind of annoyance when you're confederating a faction. Chances are that your lords rebel can be high unless you're using regiments renown or recruiting units or just get lucky to avoid that kind of rebellion. Unless, again, you're playing snitch, rather. So that is one of the things I like. I think loyalty should work better. At least confederations should work better with regards to the way the system handles. I think loyalty is kind of an outdated system in Warhammer 3, and it could be a system they use in the future, or it is a system that they should maybe get rid of to some extent. I mean, there's different ways depending on how much they want to put time and effort into that. I mean, there's a reason why Snitch doesn't have it, and there's a reason why Snitch is better off for it, even though he misses out some of the benefits of all those loyalty events, but kind of redundant benefits, a lot of them, except some of the traits you can get on lords. So that's one aspect, loyalty, food, limits. Then we got to talk a bit about the units. So, as I said, Skaven do have a wide variety of units available to them. One problem. A lot of every unit type works dependent on the situation, right? So, if we're looking at Den of Secrets, if we're looking at artillery, if we're looking at monsters, plague priests, etc. The units that kind of don't work are Clan Rats, Storm Vermin, and Skaven Slaves. The problem with Skaven Slaves and Clan Rats is that you are just better off recruiting anything else. Like, the only reason I still have a Clan Rat unit here is I haven't replaced it. The issue with Clan Rats is that they're mediocre melee infantry, and you're dealing with things like dwarves, demons, and greenskins, so mediocre is not going to cut it. Now, in the lore, the Skaven have vast numbers, but that's not represented in the game. You can only have so many units in battle at once. I think the greenskins do this better with a WoW army, so I think a lot of Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves would be better served as an additional army for every army. So kind of like a permanent WoW, but you can only get Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves in that. I think that would make a lot of sense. I mean, if you want to recruit Clan Rats for your main army, sure, fair enough, but I do think it would be great for every Skaven army to have an additional army. Maybe just remove the food capacity, allow us to gain food faster, but also make us spend it for things like that, those additional armies, maybe instant construction, all that kind of good stuff. And also, yeah, Storm Vermin just feel not especially good. And the reason they don't feel especially good is that by default, actually I don't even have the capacity to recruit them, but by default, Storm Vermin take 2 turns to recruit. Now, if you're playing if you're playing Quick, he does have a skill line that reduces that recruitment time to 1 turn faction-wide, but it is that bit of an annoyance taking 2 turns to recruit the elite, quote-unquote, melee infantry that's not more elite, really, than, say, Armor Kossars. I mean, they're better than Armor Kossars. They're not as good as Sargard, however. At least, again, from a campaign perspective. Remember, skirmish is one thing. Campaign is different because you get skill lines, you get research, you get the way you build an army. You don't just fight one unit versus another, you fight one army versus another. And the problem is Storm Vermin just aren't really that useful for Skaven in a campaign situation. And maybe that playstyle should work better than it does. Like, one of the worst decisions you can ever make in a campaign, even as quick as thinking, oh, I should recruit Storm Vermin. No, you should not. Even if you don't own the DLC, there's better units to recruit as the Skaven. So that's another thing, the Storm Vermin situation, Clan Rat situation, and yes, Skaven Slave situation. Other units work. Like, you can talk about Plague Priest, for instance, but let me explain something about Plague Priests. Basic Plague Priests are just flat out better than Clan Rats, and I'm not joking. And you should compare them to Clan Rats. I know they're tier 3 units, so you might think, oh, compare them to Storm Vermin. No. Basic Plague Priests are comparable to Clan Rats, except they're better than Clan Rats because they have freaking Frenzy and physical resistance, so keep that in mind. But then we look at Plague Monks, Plague Monks are better. But if we look at Census Bearers, they're a low armor unit, which comes with all of the issues that low armor units have, but they're a specialist unit for a specific role because of their leadership reduction and magical attacks, as well as armor piercing. Though, of course, that low armor does bring into focus a specific problem. Skaven are really bad in auto-resolve. Not because Skaven are bad in the battle. In fact, this army would definitely annihilate Forgrim's armies right here, easily even. But the problem that comes for Skaven is because a lot of their units, or a good amount of their units, especially melee infantry units, except Storm Vermin, but a lot of their units don't have the best armor. And since armor is the one thing that dictates auto-resolve outcomes more so than anything else, you can kind of understand where things go for the Skaven. That is a broader game issue, but I would say the Skaven do end up having kind of the worst of the bunch. Yes, there are units of the Skaven that do well in auto-resolve, things like Warp Fire Throwers. If you just want a good auto-resolve Skaven army, spam the hell out of these guys, and maybe Warp Grinders, but really Warp Fire Throwers. It works the same for Dwarves. The best unit Dwarves can spam recruit in a campaign for auto-resolve is Iron Drakes. Yeah, that's kind of the problem with the way auto-resolve works in Warhammer 3, is like it's encouraging you to, if you want to avoid endless grindy battles, to just like spam specific units. It's an issue that I believe should be improved on and crucially fixed in the game. So those are kind of the issues. Some are more overall game issues, like the way corruption works, but Skaven, again, like Skaven corruption is not the worst corruption, but corruption just feels very redundant right now. I know CA has talked about doing potentially a corruption public order rework, but I'm just like, I would rather not have it back to where it was in Warhammer 2. I think corruption is important, but not if it's going to be annoying again or redundant, because we can, because it just forces us to spam certain buildings in order to reduce it. That's always been the issues of how Creative Assembly has handled control and corruption. It's like, oh, we put this debuff on you. Okay, here's how you fix it. You just spam these control buildings, and that's really it, ultimately. And that was one of the things I disliked, and dislike to this day, about Rome 2 and Attila, and every game since then, because it's all built on that. Right, final thing to mention about the Skaven is their economy works, but the way it works does leave some things to be desired. To explain, the economy of the Skaven is based on you controlling, building all kinds of structures in your settlements. Virtually every Skaven structure, except certain resources like, Slaughter Factory, which gives you so many benefits you don't care about it, but virtually every structure gives you a level of money. The way you end up generating from, say, 90 income on a building to getting 2k is through the arcane generators to warpstone reactor building chain. This increases the income of buildings in a province by 50%, so it does end up generating a lot of money. The downside of this is that if you've got provinces with 3 or 4 settlements in them, you end up generating a good amount of money. So for instance, Carrick 8 Peaks over there is vastly higher level than my initial province in Blackwater, but they're about the same in terms of income, simply because there's 3 regions over here as opposed to just 2. That is something I believe Creative Assembly should improve on. Relying on an economic modifier that affects the entire province while every other structure just generates a very low amount of income is not necessarily the best system to use in the game if you're going to have a lot of 2-region provinces. And there's a lot of 2-region provinces, unfortunately, in Warhammer 3. One of the reasons Snitch is so much better than most others is he has a great starting province, he generates a lot of income from it, and he also has a lot of different great provinces in Cafe. Seriously, Snitch just gets a ton of benefits through Cafe. Whereas if you look at Queek, the main objective of your campaign is taking Caracade Peaks, which is, again, a really good city because of the fact you have a food resource and 2 landmarks, but it could be better. And don't even get me started on the fact that Skaven Blight and Hellpit, the 2 principal Skaven cities in the lore, end up being rather useless in terms of economic benefits. And of course they're useful for landmarks and such, but they end up suffering from the fact that they have limited growth because they're single region provinces, so inherently their growth is lower, and they have more limited economy. This is one of the things the Old World really does well for Skaven Blight. The Old World mod is that it puts Skaven Blight in a 4-region province. Let me tell you, Inkeclaw, whatever you might think about him, and yes, he is a good legendary lord, he's an amazing S-tier legendary lord without a doubt in the Old World mod, just because he can really fully utilize Skaven Blight there, and he has a better campaign starting dynamic. That's something that Creative Assembly should improve on. Either redesigning the map or redesigning how growth works so that if you're looking to upgrade a settlement in a single region province, you don't end up getting screwed, which is not just an issue for the Skaven, though Skaven do end up suffering it the most, at least from a physical standpoint, because Skaven Blight and Hellpit do exist. So those are the kind of things that I would like to improve about Skaven, but let me be very clear as I end this video. I think the Skaven are an amazing race. It just would be better if they worked in certain ways. Another thing, of course, would be schemes. So, for instance, the cooldown on, say, the Scheme of Doom, the Pestilence scheme. Although I kind of like the Pestilence scheme from the perspective that you can blow yourself up, though it kind of makes it a bit redundant because you do want to give plague to your enemies. Finally, we should just talk a bit about the Undercities. They're a bit pointless. I mean, Undercities can give you a bunch of benefits. And yes, they can give you faction-wide benefits as well, which is not irrelevant. But, this is the problem we have. If you take a settlement to an Undercity, that Undercity gets removed. So you're just encouraged to build a couple of Undercities very far away, but you're not really going to get the full usage out of them, especially because when you think of Undercities, they do provide all kinds of military bonuses around them. Ones that you don't use in a campaign because they get removed if you take over the settlement. So why would you put an Undercity against a faction you're going to fight when the benefits are going to be temporary? That's kind of the problem. Like, yes, you can get some military benefits, but they're not so important that it's worth the investment, because an Undercity to get those benefits would be a huge cost. Just recruit an entire army for those kind of benefits. It will be much better. In fact, when I'm playing a Queek campaign, you do start with an Undercity, and it has a military benefit right under Caracade Peaks, but it's not worth bothering with. In fact, the best thing you can do is just destroy that structure to get the money from it. It's actually a genuine benefit to do so in your campaign. That's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Stay tuned for more.